Coming up on episode 57 of Fresh Freedom, the Biden administration went full-blown political hit squad. Arctic Frost, Jack Smith, and the courts have targeted conservatives like never before. And today, Rachel Bovard is here to break it all down. Welcome to the Fresh Freedom Podcast featuring freedom-focused representatives and policy experts who are fighting for conservative values and defending your constitutional rights. I'm Nate Lucas, joined alongside Representative Eric Burleson from Missouri's 7th District, and we are thrilled to welcome Rachel Bovard to the show, Vice President of Programs at the Conservative Partnership Institute. Rachel has spent years defending conservative principles in Washington, including more than a decade of experience in both the Senate and the House. And we get to utilize CPI Studios every time we do this podcast. So great digs and great people here at CPI.
Well, thank you. We love having you.
It's like the greatest, ecosystem of conservative, groups, and what CPI has done is just awesome and amazing, and it's fantastic, and it's long needed, I think.
Well, we appreciate that. You are our friends, and we love working with you and helping you succeed. So thanks a lot.
And this week, of course, the Bellator Awards, the annual gala that the new class of fellows, which I am a part of, and looking forward to that event. And it's a great partnership. I'm over here quite a bit throughout the course of the week, and everyone's so friendly and helpful. It's an amazing resource that we get to utilize.
Awesome. Again, we love having you and the work that you guys are on the front lines, right? We'd love to help the conservative movement succeed, and you are the vanguard of that. So thanks for your work.
So the topic today is Arctic Frost, the deep state's chilling assault on our republic. And it's really just unfathomable to think about where we're at right now with all of these various documents that are coming out. We're at a moment really in history where we're recognizing that the DOJ is not just enforcing the law, but they're enforcing politics. And we are treading in very troubling waters.
Yeah, it's been hard, I think, for the media narrative to break through on this. One, because the corporate media isn't covering it, but two, because it's almost hard to wrap your mind around the scale of what we are dealing with. I hear comparisons to Watergate all the time. Watergate is child's play compared to the scale of this weaponization, this level of weaponization. And to put a fine point on it, this was Jack Smith using the authority of the Department of Justice and the FBI to literally harass and tyrannize the entire Republican political apparatus. That was Chuck Grassley's words as he was describing this when he had whistleblower documents that he released showing the close to 200 subpoenas, many of them secret, that Jack Smith issued not only to, for government data, right, of sitting senators and sitting members of Congress, activists across the country, Republican political machine apparatus positions. So they went after, the political side, they went after the activist side, they went after sitting government officials. And the only thing that stopped them from succeeding in this effort to take out the political right was Donald Trump winning in 2024. And I think that's what's so scary about it. This was an existential threat to the right, and it would have succeeded had not Donald Trump been elected.
Yeah, because the impact on every conservative group, and the goal was to create a chilling effect, to say, don't you ever get involved in conservative politics or helping out Republicans, and then to actually scare anybody else who might even consider getting involved.
That's really, I think, one of the critical ways to understand it, because you'll see people spinning it like, well, he had to investigate them because they probably participated in some kind of crime. And the guise under which this whole operation Arctic Frost was created was election interference, right? Everything was around January 6th. So the assumption that the mainstream media makes is if you were swept up in this investigation, you must have done something wrong. That wasn't the point. And to illustrate that point, some of the groups that Jack Smith went after via subpoena, one of them didn't even exist on January 6th, 2021. The second existed on paper, but had no operational value, hadn't even begun operations. And yet they were swept up in the dragnet because this wasn't about election interference. This wasn't about January 6th. That was an entire pretext to go after the right and to do, as you suggest, to intimidate, to harass, to tyrannize. Because in 2 years, Jack Smith never found a crime, right? He probed the right up and down, backwards and forwards, sideways, never found a crime because the point wasn't necessarily that. It was to harass, it was intimidate, it was to create so much friction for people to exercise their First Amendment rights, to participate in politics, to speak their mind and their views and use their resources. He never wanted them to have to participate in politics again. He said he wanted to make the cost too high. And that is what a chilling effect is. We have never seen this before in American politics, and going forward, it has to never be able to happen again.
What do we even know about Jack Smith? Why would he take this assignment and not have any issue with it whatsoever?
You know, who Jack Smith as a person is, and professionally in particular, if you look at his background, this is the type of prosecutor he is, right? He launched a vicious and political campaign against Bob McDonnell, who is the former governor of Virginia. Findings that were later, and a conviction that was later overturned by the Supreme Court, right? He has no check on himself. He has no professional demeanor. You know, that
respect for the fabric of the government,
well,
like what we were, you know, just.
But he wasn't alone, right? Because the people that had to sign off on this were Attorney General Merrick Garland, Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco, and Christopher Wray, the head of the FBI. All of them signed off on this, and every line attorney, every line special agent that participated in this saw what it was. You know, he wasn't hiding this. This was in plain sight, a gross politicization, and everybody went along with it. And I think that's what's so insidious about it, because, you know, we on the right, and I think the country for 200 years, we expect the oath of office to be the restraint when you're talking about someone like Jack Smith. We expect, you know, the founders enshrined the oath of office, the duty that you have to represent the best interests of American people over and above yourself. It was upon threat of eternal damnation, right? That was what the founders expected, that if you betrayed your oath, you were in fear of hell, right? That if you're going back to the beginning, that was the thought. And so the thought was the oath would restrain you. We now are dealing with a left that is not restrained by, you know, they are largely irreligious. They are not constrained by the threat of hell. They are not constrained by personal, you know, self-respectability and this idea that I want to be proud of what I do. The only thing that will stop them at this point, I'm convinced, is fear. And that is fear of accountability, fear of justice. And that is what Republicans must exact to make sure this never happens again.
I hope so. I mean, that's what, whenever I talk to people back in the district, they're like, okay, so, but you guys aren't going to do anything about it. That's what I often hear. And it's sad that it may have taken the senators to find out that they were swept into this, that their cell phones were subpoenaed, their cell phone records. And it's sad that might be the final straw, that maybe actually we might get some action done.
Yeah, senators found out what it was like to have their rights violated. and you know, their rights were violated, to be clear, right? Yeah. What Jack Smith did was he requested or subpoenaed tolling data on their phones. So he didn't listen to the content of the conversations, but he got literally everything else about them. He got the time of the call, who it was from, where it was placed from, how long it lasted, text messages, all of that. And that is a gross violation of the separation of powers. That is the judiciary attempting to intimidate the legislative branch, which, you know, when we talk about threats to our democracy, our sacred democracy, right? Big one staring us in the face right there is an attempt to intimidate the people's representatives and to punish them for doing their jobs. But again, senators have platforms, right? They get to speak out, and they have to have their questions answered by the government. They have that, by virtue of their role, they have that power. The thousands of activists that were swept up in this, normal, everyday people whose only crime was participating in politics, who spent thousands, sometimes millions of dollars having to defend themselves against this legal harassment.
Right.
Who's going to speak for them, and who's going to make them whole? That is the question that I have out of Arctic Frost.
Well, they deserve justice. That's why the Senate and the House, they need to, I think we need to step up the investigations, and they need, the Department of Justice under Pam Bondi needs to really step into this. Like, this is, I think it's one of the ugliest stains on in America's history.
Yeah. I think, you know, there's layers of accountability here that I think have to take place, because I think the answer to an injustice and an outrage is justice, right? And that is what must be exacted, but it cannot simply be, we caught you, right? It cannot simply be, we're going to have an angry press conference and a couple of hearings. It has got to be accountability exacted at the scale under which Arctic Frost was undertaken. And so what the Department of Justice can do for itself is fire everyone involved in this investigation.
Absolutely.
Disbar them, strip them of the security clearances, ensure they there is a professional consequence. So people know if they engage in this type of behavior, it will ruin your career. There is no professional advancement after this. It's over. But two, I think Congress has to step up here as well. They are constantly funding the tyranny used against them.
Yes.
Right? And they also allow the authorities to take place for this kind of mass surveillance. They also are responsible for the impeachment of judges, right? And if Judge Boasberg, I think it's an open question at this point whether he broke the law in allowing a gag order to be placed on the subpoena of the records of Senate phones. To unpack all that, basically, Jack Smith got the sign off on the subpoena, right, saying, I would like to get the cell phone records of these senators, and with Senator Cruz in particular, a landline in his office, requested that data as well. Judge Boasberg says, yes, you can have that subpoena. Jack Smith says, oh, by the way, and I don't want them to know about it because they might destroy evidence if they knew about it. Like a malicious, it just imputing this insane and ridiculous motive to these Republican senators. But Judge Boasberg says, yes, they in fact, they might. They might destroy evidence. And so we aren't going to tell them. Well, that on its face is maybe a violation of federal law because there's a law that states that any like cell phone or telephone information owned by the United States Senate, you have to tell the Senate that you are taking that information. There's no court order that can overcome that. They have to know. Again, separation of powers issues. And so if Judge Boasberg signed those gag orders in violation of the law, that to me would seem facially impeachable. And Congress is the only body that can do that.
Was it ironic, too, that Judge Boasberg was getting all of these requests? I mean, why was it him? This is a guy who openly gave a speech how he was going to thwart everything that Trump was doing. I mean, he's clearly got Trump derangement syndrome.
Yeah, the role that he plays, it wasn't inappropriate for him to receive these questions under the professional position that he has. But to your point, it is a little ridiculous that he keeps getting all of these questions. But what he said, in judicial conference, suggesting that the Trump administration might not respect court orders, all of these things show an internal bias that is just wildly inappropriate for the judiciary to represent. And so I do think that there are other characteristics of how he's comported himself that you could line up for impeachment in addition to potentially having violated the law with that gag order. So there's a lot of questions, I think, around Judge Boasberg that, this is not something, again, that the Republicans can just be like, oh, well, hopefully shame is enough. Well, shame does not work here.
And then, hey, and then let's forget about that. We're going to appropriate more funds for these like corrupt agencies without any kind of oversight. And like, for example, last year, we attempted to during the FISA reauthorization, they identified that the FBI had misused FISA like several 100,000 times to spy on American citizens. And what do? We renew it without requiring a warrant or any kind of like real reform. And I mean, that's our response. Like we see all these dirty cops. And I love that Trump uses that phrase. Like they're dirty cops. And we see them do this activity and then we go, okay, we're going to send you more money.
It's literally handing them the stick with which to beat you and then complaining when they beat you with it.
Yes.
Right. It logically makes no sense. But I think, Republican members of Congress, I think, are catching up to this moment because historically, oversight and shame was enough, right? Calling these people out. We saw this with the big tech companies. Well, we've exposed you now. We're in a post-shame environment. It doesn't work because their agenda is political. The power is the only thing that motivates these people, and using the government to harass their political opposition, bankrupt them, smear them, push them out of politics entirely, jail them, right? Indicting Donald Trump 5 times. We aren't playing by those rules anymore. Accountability under the law is the only thing that they will listen to.
Rachel, I think you either retweeted something or you pointed this out, that one of the ongoing issues is that if you look at what the documents that they've released, there's still all of these names are redacted.
Yeah.
Why? Why are they getting any protection whatsoever? Like you said, if you were involved in this in any way, shape, or form, you should be totally disbarred and gone.
Yeah.
And exposed.
That's my perpetual frustration because, you'll hear all these sources and methods. We have to protect them. This was a lawless exercise. So they do not get to hide behind the fig leaf of the color of law. They should not be protected. The American people deserve to see the entire measure of sociopathy that was committed in their name, because that's the most offensive thing about all of this. It was done in our name. My own tax dollars were used to try to harass this organization of which I co-founded out of existence, simply because Ed Corrigan and I spend our time teaching Senate staff what cloture is, right?
Right.
And it was done with my tax dollars in my name, to me.
Right.
I'm so offended by that, and I want the name of everybody that was involved, and I want an explanation for why they are still working at the FBI.
What can you go into more detail? So what do they get out of your records? Like your emails, your bank statements? Like what did they?
Yes,
ask
I mean
for?
CPI, like many of the organizations, I think there were nearly 200 subpoenas, over 400 individuals swept up, over 100 conservative groups. I mean, it was a very vast exercise. So we were not alone, right? CPI is not special in this regard. You saw, Citizens United Foundation, TPUSA, AFPI, like these are just a handful of the number of groups that were under this kind of microscope. But yeah, I mean, it's been public now thanks to Chuck Grassley's whistleblower documents, which again is confusing to me why we're still getting whistleblower documents from our own administration. But
yeah, why? What? Like, to your point, like they need to go in and clean house from the top down.
Some of the subpoenas on that list we knew about, right? Because they subpoenaed us for individuals within our organization, Mark Meadows especially, right? For all these different communications. You have to spend a lot of money to comply with these subpoenas. Again, the harassment is the point. And to turn over all this stuff to the government requires hours and hours of collecting that data, having lawyers review it, paying for the lawyers to review it, then turning it over. It is a long, arduous, and expensive process. Those are the subpoenas that we knew about. But then, thanks to these whistleblowers, we find out there were all these other secret subpoenas that we didn't know about. They subpoenaed our bank records. Our banks never told us. They subpoenaed our HR records. Those companies never told us. And, oftentimes that's because the FBI will make sure they cannot tell you. And we, again, we're not alone in this. Hundreds of groups were affected by this. But then we also found out so there's the whistleblower documents that were sent to Chuck Grassley, and then there was the unclassified documents issued by Kash Patel with all the redactions. Within those Kash Patel documents, we find an email about Ed Corrigan, who is the president of CPI, has been my mentor for over a decade. In it, Ed Corrigan is accused of fomenting treason, which is a death penalty offense, I'd like to remind people.
Oh my goodness.
Because he is apparently pro-Putin and anti-Biden and has bad plans for the FBI. He is training people for civil war. It is so unhinged. And on one hand, it's hilarious because it reads like a subreddit thread of hallucinations. But on the other hand, it's not funny because the government took it seriously and used it to build a case against CPI. And it went up the chain at the Seattle field office of the FBI, and it was used to open an investigation into CPI.
Yeah.
Absolute insanity.
And the fact is, like, it wasn't like there was any violence. Like, we're not like, conservatives are not like Antifa, right? We're not like all the violence that occurs from the left. And the fact that Charlie Kirk is no longer with us, but yet they treated us like we were some kind of real violent or physical threat.
The irony of it coming out of the Seattle field office, the headquarters of Antifa on the West Coast, basically.
Summer of Love. This FBI thought it was more appropriate to go after CPI, which again, I teach a 10-week course on Senate procedure.
Yes.
I hate to call us harmless, but
you're so dangerous,
so
Rachel.
dangerous. They might find out what cloture is and launch a civil war. But that was appropriate. But Antifa is like literally fomenting an anarchy in their backyard. And they're like, whatever. Summer of love.
I think there are a lot of
protest.
I think there are a lot of individuals who feel vindicated by the release of this and seeing this investigation unravel. But in a lot of ways, I would imagine anyone who thought this years ago and were talking about it, and then people stared at them like they had a tinfoil hat on, it's also just extremely sad because this is truly the unraveling of a definition, I suppose, of a banana republic. And it's unsustainable. So unless there's real accountability for these individuals and we see that, it'll happen again. And I guess it's the old line of fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me.
Yeah, and there's a faction on the right that says, lawfare is bad, and any response to this would just be continuing the lawfare. I don't like lawfare either, but I don't know how this ends unless you have a swift accountability for it under the color of law. Right? I am not suggesting the right become lawless. I am suggesting that the right exact accountability at the scale of this. Otherwise, how will you deter it? Democrats have shown us they will do this again. They've done it now. Arctic frost is what they will do. The question now is, how are Republicans, what are we prepared to do to make sure this never happens again?
Yeah. Sadly, it seems like we're always bringing a Nerf gun to a gunfight.
And Democrats aren't electing more moderate people in their party.
No.
Case in point,
sure
from
aren't.
New York City. Like, they just elected a communist socialist. So
They just elected a guy who fantasized about the murder of his political opponent and his children dying, bleeding out in his mother's arms. And, Virginia Democrats saw that and they were like, that's our guy. It's really shocking.
It's sad. It's kind of scary. I don't know where this goes from here as a country. I mean, I was having breakfast with a former senator who was making the observation that when he was in office, that generally speaking, most states had one Democrat elected senator and one Republican. And you kind of, they debated, for example, they all wanted our schools to be great and they all wanted our military to be strong. They just had maybe a nuanced view as to how we get there. Now it's like, I don't know how you agree with a social like Mamdani. I don't know how we can find some kind of common ground, which is why I think it's becoming so fractured as a nation. I'm worried. I think we should all be worried about this turning more violent.
Yeah. And that's the fear. And I think more than ever, the right has to unify. Right? The right has to unify that this behavior is unacceptable and it has to be deterred, because I do think, there's a number of ways I think we can move forward, but one of the key ways is that Democrats have to know that this behavior has consequence, right? The right has never really meaningfully punished the Democrats for any of the things that they've done. And I'm not talking about, outside of the law, within the bounds of society, accountability, within the bounds of the law.
Right.
Showing as a baseline, you have no career if you engaged in this. Like, that level of response, that is a baseline for Republicans in this moment. Because to your point, there are very, very thin threads holding us together at this point. It might just be that, both of us are convinced to lay down our arms because we're just so scared of how the other might respond. But right now, we don't have that balance. Right now, it is completely the left clobbering the right and the right being confused and disoriented and not sure how to respond.
play offense.
It's the only way forward, I think, at this point.
I think so as well. Well, this is a great discussion. It's incredibly crazy. Folks who might not be all that familiar with Arctic frost or these names of Judge Boasberg or Jack Smith, it's worth everyone's time to go independently look into it, because you're not going to hear about it on legacy media. They're focused on like Trump redoing a ballroom or something.
Right.
That's more important.
Yeah, please, learn more about this. The Federalist has been writing a ton about it. I have a piece coming out soon on Arctic frost in the Federalist, and they have been doing great coverage. There's a lot of noise right now, but this is a pure signal, and everybody needs to focus on it.
100%. Cleta Mitchell, who fellow here at CPI, she has a piece out in the Federalist today that's definitely worthwhile. So there's plenty of resources that are covering it. It just might not be your legacy media. So Rachel Bovard, thank you so much. Appreciate the discussion.
Thanks for having me.
Congressman, thank you as always. You can catch Fresh Freedom across all podcast platforms. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Stand strong, stay informed, and keep fighting for freedom.